morning. Good morning. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
It's good to welcome you here this morning. Let's see, Christmas, yeah. Christmas is always such a big push, and it's such a relief to be on the other side of it. But this is that great time when we get to reflect a little bit. You know, there's such concern about making sure that we're ready for the day of. But here we are in the rest of the church, the Christmas season. We get a couple of weeks here in the church to reflect on what this means to us. And today is perhaps the most awful reading that we could possibly have in the season of Christmas. Our gospel lesson is about the king being threatened and ordering the slaughter of the babies. What an awful, horrible, terrible, nasty reading for today. It is every preacher's nightmare to have to deal with what is referred to as the slaughter of the innocents. That's the official name on the church calendar for today. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to think about that. I mean, Christmas is a joyous time, and that part of the story is not a pleasant part of the story. But that's part of what our lectionary does, is has us look at things that we may not be most eager to look at, has us think about some unpleasant things, and has us reflect on where God is amidst those unpleasant moments. And so that's a little bit of precursor to our text for today. I found a story that I think helped me reflect on this, so I look forward to sharing that with you in a few minutes. This is the Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew, the 2nd chapter. Now after the wise men had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother by night, and went to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I have called my son." When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, he was infuriated, and he sent and killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had learned from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they are no more. When Herod died, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared again in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who were seeking the child's life are dead." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And after being warned in a dream, he went away to the district of Galilee. There he made his home in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled, he will be called a Nazarene. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
God's grace, mercy, and peace be yours this day through Christ, our Savior and Lord. A couple preliminary comments about this text. It's easy to get caught up in the horror of it, and I think honestly, it's people have struggled with this text for a lot of years. That in the midst of this season of celebration, to have this really hard news about the reality of the circumstances back in the day, that the power of the day, that Herod was so threatened by the idea that a new king had come, that he would order the death of children, the slaughter of children. Some have wondered, how many was that? I mean, was that everybody in the land? All these kids all over the place? People have wondered, was that like 20,000 or 40,000? Or one speculation, they even put it at 144,000 because that's the number mentioned in Revelation. But scholars were saying, wait a minute, this is getting way out of hand. There were probably in Bethlehem maybe about 1,000 people living there. So when you look at kids under the age of 2, probably about 20 kids. Not to minimize that, still horrible, but I think it's helpful to have some more specifics about what we're talking about. The people back in the day would have recognized this. They had seen this before. It's shocking for us to consider that a king would order the death of children. I mean, it's just horrible, horrible idea, horrible to even consider. But the ancient people said, yeah, this isn't the first time this has happened. And that validates the child in some ways. It says that, yeah, he really is special, that the king would be that threatened. It also echoes back to another time. Thinking about the people who are first hearing this gospel, we're talking about Jewish people who had studied the Old Testament, who had studied the scriptures, and knew about ancient figures like Abraham and Moses. In a lot of ways, Jesus is being set up here as a new Moses. If you recall the story of Moses' birth, Pharaoh was threatened by all the babies being born at that time. There were too many Hebrews around, and so he ordered the baby boys to be killed. And Moses had to be put in a basket and sent down the river. And here Jesus, again, is in similar circumstances. The ancient people would have said, hey, this is just like Moses. And Moses was sent to free the people from slavery. This king that has come, this Messiah that has come for us, maybe he will do something similar and free us from slavery. Not from having to build big pyramids, but another kind of slavery. Slavery to sin. So just a little background. And then we get into thinking about what this text might say to us. We obviously live in a very different time, very different age. What do we need to hear in this? I think it's amazing in reading through this story that Joseph keeps getting messages from God in a dream. The importance of dreams. What would happen if he was an insomniac and didn't sleep very well? God would have had to find another way to talk to him, right? But I think that's part of the beauty, is that God finds ways to communicate with us. God finds ways to talk to us that we can hear. Sometimes dreams, sometimes chance encounters. An angel in disguise. Several winters ago, around Christmas time, I ran over a boy on a sled. He flew out of nowhere during a serious snowstorm, a small figure darting down a steep farmyard into the road, just as my blazer came over a knoll. Through the veil of snow, I caught only the briefest glimpse of him, an impression of startled eyes behind the eyeglasses, a blue parka, before I sharply cut the wheel. I remember hearing the awful crunch, a muffled cry, and then my truck was sliding down a steep incline, plowing sideways through deep drifts, coming to rest almost on its side. I sat there with groceries strewn all over the place for perhaps 10 seconds. Then I ripped off my shoulder belt, kicked open the door with my boot, and clawed my way through the knee-deep snow back up the bank. The boy was lying in the middle of the road, eerily still. My legs, he cried softly. I can't move my legs. Crouching by his side, I remember thinking two things with an almost military clarity. First, I had to get him out of the road or we would both be run over by the next vehicle to come over the knoll. Second, this kid was going to die or at least never walk again because I'd crushed him. As I knelt there with snow pouring down like cinders from heaven, a flood of soft paternal words began flowing from my mouth. Listen to me, son. You're going to be okay. But first we have to get you off the road. Try and relax. Everything will be fine. I don't know whom I was trying to convince most. He closed his eyes, nodded, and I moved his limp body gently to the shoulder, aware that I could be doing even more damage, severing what was left of the mangled spinal cord or destroying whatever muscle tissue or nerve connections remained. But I couldn't risk a plow truck roaring down on us at any second. Can you move your fingers? I asked. Yeah, he replied, and he showed me. Snowflakes were accumulating and melting on his flushed face. I studied his eyes to see if he was slipping into shock. They were clear. I guessed that he was 12 or 13 years old. A good-looking kid, I realized, and incredibly brave. Then from behind us rose a heart-rending wail. I turned and saw a large, coatless woman struggling to maneuver through the snow, two children in her wake. Oh God, oh my God, she cried. She lost her footing and tumbled comically into the drift at the bottom of the driveway. and I had no option but to go and help her out. I extended her my hand and pulled her from the drift. Her face was a mask of anguish, the face of a mother confronted with the unthinkable. We stood there in each other's awed embrace for a moment, performing a little minuet on a slippery road, staring briefly into each other's eyes until we heard a small sound, and we simultaneously turned to face the boy. He was standing up. "It's okay, Mom," he said, rubbing his back. "I think I'm okay." His name was Matthew, and he was the son of a church caretaker. He sat on a chair in his mother's warm kitchen, holding back sobs. "Why are you crying, Matthew?" his mother asked. "Are you injured?" "No," he said with a trembling voice. "I was just thinking, I don't know why I wasn't killed." His younger sister Rose explained what had happened. When school was called off for the day, they'd gone into the backyard meadow to sled, but the farm's steeper front yard tempted them. They never even considered the danger of the road. "I could have been killed," Matthew repeated in a kind of daze. "I don't know why I wasn't killed." "Because we were both incredibly lucky," I answered. "I think it was a miracle," his mother said. Later, I went outside to watch the wrecker winch my truck out. The tires were flattened. The fender was bent. "I don't see how you missed running him clean over. It's amazing," said the police officer, indicating the intersecting skid pattern and sled track. "Dang near a miracle," piped up the driver of the wrecker. I went back to say goodbye to Matthew and to his mother. He'd gone to lie down, and his mother thanked me profusely. We actually embraced, and she began to cry. I told her I would call in a day or so to see how everyone was doing. Are you okay?" she asked me. "Yes," I replied, "I'm fine." But I wasn't. In fact, I had never been more deeply shaken in my life. No matter what the police officer had said, I knew that the boy had disappeared under the front of my truck. He had somehow survived with only an angry red welt on the small of his back to show for it. I just couldn't explain it. I too might have said that it was a miracle if I believed in such things. But miracles have always struck me as the cheap parlor tricks of faith, things cited by Vegas-style preachers to keep the crowd interested and the tithes flowing. I went home and sat for a couple of hours watching chickadees dive bomb our bird feeder. I didn't feel like moving or talking. My wife took our two small children, Maggie and Jack, out shopping. As I sat there, alone, the movie projector between my ears played the accident over and over. Before I hit Matthew, I had been having what my wife calls my annual Christmas crisis, a private little tempest of the soul that begins somewhere around the winter solstice, when darkness descends like a closing curtain, and news programs flood us with the year's most memorable human and natural disasters. On the morning of the big snowstorm, I was still in a funk, and I couldn't quite understand why. And so, at the height of the storm, disgusted with my disgust, I decided to go to the grocery store. It was empty, save for a lone clerk totaling the items of an elderly woman. She was buying a magazine and a potted plant. I noticed she was wearing running shoes instead of boots. "It's beautiful outside, isn't it?" she said, smiling at me. "But you know, some people always drive too fast when it's snowing." "Kooky old bird," I said to myself. But I smiled back and agreed, and got back in my blazer and headed home. Turning onto Meadow Cross Road, however, I kept thinking about what she had said. As I approached the knoll by the farm, I cut my speed by half. An instant later, Matthew flew under my wheels. In the aftermath of the accident, I kept wondering how to say thank you to someone who enters your life for 15 seconds. All I knew about her was that she likes houseplants and could use a new pair of boots. Then I happened across a copy of Time magazine with, of all things, a painting of an angel on its cover. "The New Age of Angels," read the headline. I started reading. In her best-selling collection of Angel Encounters, A Book of Angels, the article said, author Sophie Burnham writes that angels disguise themselves as a dream, a comforting presence, a pulse of energy, a person, to ensure that the message is received, even if the messenger is explained away. It's not that skeptics do not experience the mysterious and divine, she explains, but rather that the mysteries are presented to them in such an everyday, reasonable way so as not to disturb. Once again, I sat in my den mulling this one over. I considered the possibility that my guardian angel was an old lady in sneakers who thought the world would be a better place if we all slowed down and noticed the passing scenery. Our church's Christmas Eve service that winter was held in a freezing barn with real sheep and a bracing air of fresh manure. Just the kind of place you'd expect a son of man to pick for a nursery suite. An overfull crowd, mostly families with small kids, heard St. Matthew's account of the virgin birth. And then as we went back out into the night, the snow began to fall as if on cue. When we got home, 4-year-old Maggie took my hand, then suddenly let go and ran and flopped in the yard. Her younger brother Jack followed on her heels, falling with his arms joyously outspread. "Look, Daddy," Maggie cried out, "snow angels!" Frankly, I'd completely forgotten about snow angels. But I think the ones my children made that Christmas Eve were outstanding. Even more amazing, in the morning they were still there. The circumstances of the story of Jesus' birth and the threatened king and the horror that followed, it's easy to get distracted by the thought of innocent children's lives being taken. But there is good news in this. That God spoke. God showed up, in this instance in a dream, repeatedly to Joseph. And that Joseph was open enough to hear it. And perhaps that's what we need to hear this morning. That God is speaking to us through chance encounters, unusual events, happenstantial conversations, maybe even a dream. That God is speaking words of protection,